In this series of videos, Outlook Expeditions aim to get you confident and prepared to take a group of young people into a high-altitude environment. Understanding the high-altitude environment, brought to you by Outlook Expeditions and the Extremes Research Group, Bangor University. So, you have a group of young people at high altitude, and it's up to you to look out for them. One of the first things to understand is that people struggling at high altitude isn't always about oxygen. There are many factors which will affect your young people, adults and even in-country staff. Here are some factors that you should prepare for. Getting to altitude can be hard work. Your group may not have experience of walking on rough terrain, up and down steep hills, or carrying heavy rucksacks. Sometimes the weather won't help. Expect wind and precipitation to be more extreme than at sea level. The temperature can vary greatly. At night it can drop below freezing, whilst during the day it can rise to desert-like temperatures. Just when you need lots of energy, people at altitude often eat less for a whole host of reasons. Being higher in the atmosphere at altitude means the effect of the sun is stronger. In addition, reflection from snow and ice increases the effect of the sun's rays. During the trip, the young people will inevitably have some uncomfortable nights of sleep. However, altitude can worsen sleep quality. General health is also compromised on expeditions. Colds and tummy upsets are common. So, the altitude environment poses multiple stresses and challenges. It can also feel very remote and is often a new experience for young people. Thus, it's not surprising that mental stress is very common too. We haven't even discussed oxygen yet. That's the topic of the next animation in this series. Altitude. Effects of reduced oxygen availability on performance. Brought to you by Outlook Expeditions and the Extremes Research Group, Bangor University. You may be surprised to learn that oxygen concentration at altitude is the same as that at sea level. But air has weight, and that weight causes pressure on the body. Pressure helps push oxygen from the air into our bodies. As we increase in altitude, lower air pressure means less oxygen is pushed into our red blood cells to be carried around the body. This means less oxygen to the brain, which can make simple cognitive tasks harder. High altitude affects your physical performance too. Even with acclimatization, the same exercise at sea level can feel twice as hard for anyone at altitude. You can help your young people prepare for this by encouraging them to improve their fitness prior to departure. Being fitter won't help with acclimatization to high altitude itself, but it will help you tolerate the arduous exercise that you will typically do on an expedition, making the expedition more enjoyable. Just remember, if fit people move too quickly at altitude, they can worsen altitude illness symptoms. Learn more about altitude illness in our other animation. Optimizing performance and health at altitude. Brought to you by Outlook Expeditions and the Extremes Research Group, Bangor University. In a previous video, we talked about performance at altitude being reduced due to less oxygen availability. Unfortunately, once you're at high altitude, very little can be done to combat the effects of low oxygen on our bodies. Carrying a source of supplementary oxygen often isn't realistic. But you can control how much young people eat and drink, which is just as important for performance and health. At altitude, you'll find that most people lose some weight, which might be beneficial for some of us. But too much weight loss can be detrimental. On average, whilst at altitude, we are in negative energy balance by 500 kilocalories per day, which is equivalent to a couple of chocolate bars. Not much, but enough to impact performance and health during a long, arduous expedition. Food is a very important part of any trip. At Outlook Expeditions, we like to encourage young people to embrace local food and culture, but it's also important to ensure a well-balanced diet, as this will maximize health and performance. If you want to give more specific advice, carbohydrate supplementation will likely improve endurance performance and make physical activity feel easier. Just remember to get your YP to try foods they're not used to before going to altitude. Ensure food is easy to prepare and include some favourite foods and easily accessible snacks. Give options on where people can eat, as some individuals may feel uncomfortable eating in a group situation. Fluid intake can be tricky too. Advise young people to keep an eye on their hydration levels by checking the frequency and colour of their urine to make sure they're getting enough fluid. But there's no need to overdo it if they're adequately hydrated. And remember, they can drink whatever they like as long as they're taking fluid on.